this is the like the epitome of what happens every single time. You come in, whether you're a AAA dev or an indie or whatever, you try to come into an extraction game and you try to make it and you try to remove the friction. There's a lot of friction in a game like Tarkov. There's a lot of like complexity and things that might not want you to open up the game ever. Hundreds of bullet types, thousands of individual items, quests that don't tell you at all where to go, no map. I mean, the weapon attachment system is like, what am I doing? Right? So much friction.
All right, people, it's your boy, D-Boy Henry Heck, back at it again with another video. And today I wanted to make a reaction to Shroud's opinion on Marathon, which I just played about, you know, removing the friction. And I'm going to continue to let his point rock out. But this beginning portion is really where, you know, what interests me with the video, with his take, and it caused me to say and I also, you know, some other games immediately popped inside of my mind, of games that, you know, removed the friction, because this, in some people's eyes, I feel like this is a hardcore versus casual situation, whereas your hardcore people want that friction, need that friction. If a game doesn't have that friction, then they won't want to play it. But even in his explanation, he explained how this friction could cause other individuals to not even want to open up the game, you know, because of how complex it is. And, you know, you really have to be entrenched inside of the learning process of the game. And quite honestly, a lot of people, well, I won't say a lot, some people don't want to do that. Some people just want to play a fun game. Some people just want to play, you know, a game whereas it's not as punishing. And rather than have Tarkov change its formula and change the way it does things, therein lies an opportunity for a developer to, you know, step foot inside of that subgenre and make that game, you know, so that way people who love Tarkov the way it is still got Tarkov as it is. That way people who are interested in joining and trying out an extraction shooter, which is more forgiving and different, then now they have a game where they can do that. You know what I mean? I don't think it's necessarily about, you know, closing your doors to a specific type of gamer or opening your doors to a specific type of gamer. It's just more so, in my opinion, about giving players an opportunity, giving developers an opportunity to create a space wherein, you know, those gamers I was speaking of who may not be as hardcore, who may not, you know, have the time to dive fully into these systems and learn them and be entrenched, still have a place they can go to experience this type of gameplay inside of a shooter. But I'm gonna let them rock. Let them rock. See if we can get to the remainder of the remainder of the video. We're gonna let them cook.
There's so much friction to play Tarkov. Most people don't even open that game. But that friction is...
See, we said most people don't open that game. So for some people who are interested and look it up to and just see how complex it is and just decide not to play it, Marathon may be a game where they can, you know, get their feet wet. Maybe even a game where they can just get started, and maybe they graduate into a Tarkov. You know, maybe Marathon is a stepping stone for those individual. You know what I mean? But back to Shroud and him cooking.
What makes the game so popular to its core audience? So it's weird. You come in, you're a new dev, or a AAA dev, whatever, and you want to remove the friction, great. You remove the friction, the game is smooth, the game's easy to play, anyone can just click play and just be right in it. But they only play for a couple weeks or a month, and then they're like, well, there's nothing left to learn. Well, yeah, that's because you just removed all the friction. All the friction's gone, all the tooltips. Like, for example, a perfect example is this, yeah? On this screen, you see every single item and its value. You don't learn the value as a player. You instantly are told what it's worth. That is a developer coming in and saying, we're going to remove the friction and remove the complications of like the complexity of like seeing an item and being like, what is this? We're just going to tell you what it is. It's worth $1,000. That's it. Great if you're playing the game for the first time. Bad if you're playing the game for the 1,000th time. Because what makes extraction shooters good and interesting is giving that player the knowledge, the tools to like learn the game themselves, figure out what a pack of cigarettes is for. And I know it's really stupid. And
I'm gonna pause it right there, but that in what he just said, you know, I don't necessarily agree with, because what it's boiling down to is because it's easier, people will get bored quicker, you know. And I just don't believe that's true. Because just because they tell you the value doesn't necessarily make it less interesting, you know, because you still have to drop down. You still have to, you know, get in gunfights and search and loot and do contracts. And there's things happening in the game to keep it interesting. It's not just about picking up items and trying to figure out how much it's worth, you know. And I know that's kind of like a overly simplified response to what he's saying, because, you know, I feel like he's just speaking to a specific demographic of gamer, you know, because he said himself, the core Tarkov fan base, the core, you know, those are the guys who are spending that $100, you know, and sure, they may hop into Marathon and just check it out and then go right back to the game they've been playing and loving and invested time and tons of money into, you know, the more hardcore, you know, get in where you fit in type of game. Those guys probably will do that, you know. But this game has the potential to attract I won't say a larger demographic, but it's open to a large demographic just by nature of it being on console. So console gamers will get the, you know, opportunity to check this style of game out, because we've not had much in the vein of an extraction shooter on console. You know, of course, we had the Division, who brought the whole extraction shooter in on console, you know, the Dark Zone. That's the first extraction shooter experience I had. And then we had games like Vigor, you know, which I put a little time into, probably maybe 10, 12 hours, not a ton, because it just wasn't a lot going on in the game. You know, we had DMZ. We got the opportunity to play some DMZ, which was legit. I love that mode. Word is it may be coming back. Rumors are it's coming back, so we'll have to see. And then we also have Arc Raiders coming. So console gamers are finally getting exposed to some legitimate extraction shooters, you know. So I get where he's coming from to a degree. Coming from a hardcore extraction shooter, you know, base, he may have a point right there. But, you know, some people may have said the same thing about, you know, tac shooters. Then they came to console. We had Warface, which didn't last too long. But Siege is super popular on console. You know, it's regularly in the top 10 on the most played lists on PlayStation and Xbox. And they've been running game over there for like 10 years. So I feel as though it being open to being open to the console players, and some people could make the argument that console players aren't as hardcore as the, PC guys, but at the same time, you do have to recognize that it's more people are going to be playing your game other than the hardcore. Casuals are going to play the game, and casual gamers are your people who is going to, I would make the argument, make up the majority of the player base. Not everybody's going to be a hardcore out here willing and dealing. Not everybody that logs on to Call of Duty is a hardcore willing and dealer. Not everybody that hops onto a siege is of that cloth. You know what I mean? But I just wanted to jump in right there right quick, because just because they tell you what something does doesn't mean it automatically becomes less interesting, especially if it's not a game type that you've previously experienced. So you won't know no better anyway if you've not played Tarkov, if you've not played Mercenaries, if you've not played Delta Force. I think it's called Delta Force. So if this is going to be your first taste into the extraction shooter, then what you know is what you know. What they show you is what you know. And coming from the division, after your stuff is decontaminated, you find out what it is. But after it's decontaminated, you kind of get used to what the loot is going to be. So it's kind of the same situation as what's going to be in Marathon, except for after a couple of times there, you learn it, and after you pick it up for the first time on Marathon, then you know it.
Nobody thinks like that. Most people are like, just tell me what the pack of cigarettes are for, man. But what's fun about extraction shooters is when they don't tell you.
You see? And he keeps saying most, which is majority. So if most people say, well, just tell me what the cigarettes are, then I don't think they would get bored if they've been told what the cigarettes are. You know what I mean? I don't think, especially, coming from console, and I'm not saying it's not cool to find shit out and figure shit out and, discover stuff on your own without the game tell. I'm not saying that that's not cool and that's not exciting, but it's not the end all be all, especially in a shooter where in my opinion, most of your excitement is going to come from the gun engagements, the tension of, doing a contract and not knowing if a rival team is going to pop up. You in a gunfight with a rival team and the tension of possibly getting third party. Not to mention the MP. You know what I mean? It's a lot of other things that'll be going on inside of the map that will be exciting and interesting, other than how much is the pack of cigarettes worth.
Get rid of.
Okay, so that was the video. He got his rocks off, and like I said, there's some things in there that I can understand why he's saying what he's saying, because this guy's a CS:GO pro, ex-pro. He's a veteran in the shooter space, and his opinion does hold weight. But when he's presented certain opinions, I just feel like he's coming at it from the lens of, I'm a hardcore guy. This is how hardcore Tarkov guys are looking at it. Because another video I had watched on the game was from StoneMount64, who was optimistic. And I'm not saying Shroud's not optimistic. He did. There's another video where he was like big up in the game. This is just him, diving a little deeper, going beneath the flesh, if you will, in a breakdown of kind of the mentality of, a hardcore guy coming from a hardcore game, looking at a more, not to say watered down to be disrespectful, but a more casualized version of the style of game that the hardcore people are used to. That might be confusing to understand, but you kind of get where I'm coming from. And so I respect it, but I just felt like putting my little 2 cents out there, because there are games that have removed the friction and have been successful. the most famous games as a service of all, Fortnite. I'm sure some people out there probably had similar, opinions about what Fortnite was aiming to do inside of the battle royale shooter subgenre. Did they not? Yeah, they had systems in there, that mechanics that set them apart, but they also largely made it, I guess, not to say easier, but more palatable. You know what I'm saying? And even further on down the line, when respawn beacons and etc. were introduced into battle royale, that's removing friction. But it was largely successful. So it's a couple different ways you can look at it, and just because friction is removed does not mean people will become disinterested or find it to be less fun. At least not enough people to where it could kill a game. Especially to people who aren't used to doing things one way. If you're used to the Tarkov way, you might feel a little disgusted. But if you've not played Tarkov or any other tech shooter, and this is the tech shooter you learn, and this is where you gain an appreciation for not tech shooters, but extraction shooters. But if this is where you learn extraction shooters and gain an appreciation for the subgenre, then I don't think you will mind, them telling you how much the cigarettes cost. But that's all I got for you right now. Let me know your opinions inside the comments. Drop a like. Are you looking for the marathon? The alpha is upon us. Did you get a code? That's all I got for you right now. We'll catch y'all on the side of the next one. I'm gone.